In early 2026, as the world watches a fragile global economy try to stabilize after years of inflation, supply shocks, and shifting alliances, one unexpected move from Canada just stunned Washington. Mark Carney, the man long described as one of the most disciplined economic minds in the West, just told the United States no. And with that one word, he didn't just reject a proposal. He disrupted Washington's carefully built plan. A plan that was supposed to realign trade, secure supply chains, and reassert American control in a world that's slipping away from it. Carney's refusal has left the White House scrambling, the U.S. Department of Commerce speechless, and global analysts asking a simple question: did Canada just end Washington's leverage over North American trade? To understand how big this moment is, you need to see what Washington was trying to do in 2026. After the turbulent 2024 elections and the deep political divides that carried into 2025, the U.S. administration came into this year under immense pressure to stabilize its economy. The American manufacturing sector has been under strain, jobs moving abroad, supply chains stretched, and inflation biting into consumer confidence. So, Washington revived a plan it's been quietly crafting since 2022, a North American economic consolidation initiative. The goal was simple: build a closed economic circle among the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Inside that circle, critical minerals, energy exports, and technology components would stay friendly, under Western control, and away from Chinese and Russian influence. It was a bold vision, but it required cooperation, especially from Canada. Because Canada isn't just a neighbor. It's the United States' lifeline for energy, clean tech materials, and trade stability. From Alberta oil sands to Quebec's battery production to Ontario's car factories, Canada sits at the intersection of America's green transition and its industrial revival. And that's why Washington expected Ottawa to say yes without hesitation. But this time, it didn't. In a high-level trade negotiation this January, U.S. officials pushed Canada to sign onto a new trade adjustment agreement, one that would give American firms expanded access to Canadian raw materials and guarantee U.S. dominance in clean tech exports across the continent. Mark Carney, acting as Canada's lead economic representative and rumored future Prime Minister-in-waiting, listened carefully. He reviewed the proposal. He saw the clauses. And then, in classic Carney fashion, quietly, professionally, without drama, he said no. No to Washington's terms. No to a deal that would anchor Canada's economy under American regulation. And no to the idea that sovereignty could be traded for regional security. That single refusal sent a shock through Washington's corridors. The trade plan, months in development, effectively collapsed overnight. By now, the world knows who Mark Carney is. He's not just another bureaucrat. He's the former governor of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, one of the few people trusted across continents for his grasp of global finance. He's been central to the post-COVID-19 pandemic recovery narrative, advising G7 leaders and shaping discussions about green investment. In 2026, his voice carries weight. When he speaks, markets listen. And when he says no, the entire system recalibrates. Carney understood exactly what Washington's plan meant. Behind the talk of integration was dependence. Behind regional alignment was control. He saw a future where Canada's trade flows, resource exports, and even environmental policies would be dictated by American domestic politics, shifting with each election, changing with each crisis. And he wasn't going to let that happen. Washington made one critical mistake in 2026. It assumed the old playbook still worked. For decades, America's foreign economic strategy has relied on influence, offer access to the U.S. market in exchange for compliance. That model worked in the 1990s, maybe even the 2000s. But in this multipolar world, that leverage is fading. By early 2026, nations from Germany to Japan have begun diversifying trade away from single dependencies. The European Union now trades more with Asia than the US, India, and Brazil are forming new financial partnerships. And the BRICS expansion has given emerging economies an alternative to Western financial systems. In that new reality, Washington can no longer assume obedience. Carney saw that clearly. So, when U.S. negotiators tried to push Canada into what they described as a strategic trade alignment, he recognized the trap and walked away. Inside Washington, the fallout was immediate. Reports from Capitol Hill described deep frustration among economic advisors. The North American Supply Chain Framework, set to be announced this spring, was suddenly shelved. Without Canada, the entire plan lost its foundation. Mexico alone couldn't fill that gap. Not in energy, not in minerals, not in credibility. The irony? Carney's no didn't just block a deal. It exposed the fragility of Washington's strategy. It showed that America's dominance in the hemisphere now depends more on persuasion than power, and persuasion is something Washington hasn't mastered lately. Markets hate uncertainty, but they love independence. The moment news broke of Carney's refusal, analysts expected turbulence. Instead, something surprising happened. The Toronto Stock Exchange surged slightly. Canadian energy firms saw investor inflows, and European markets responded with optimism, signaling increased trust in Canada's economic direction. Investors interpreted Carney's move not as defiance, but as confidence. In a world where most nations bend under pressure, Canada just stood tall. And that kind of stability in 2026 is priceless. There's a deeper logic behind this refusal, and it's rooted in Canada's long-term vision. Since 2020, Canada has quietly diversified trade away from the U.S. agreements with the European Union, South Korea, and ASEAN have strengthened. Canadian exports to Europe are up 40% compared to pre-COVID-19 pandemic levels. And Canada's new clean tech partnerships with Japan and Germany are reshaping its energy sector. Carney understood that joining Washington's restrictive deal would undo years of careful diversification. It would tie Canada's economy to the whims of American politics, especially as the U.S. heads into another volatile election year in November 2026. So his no was not emotional. It was strategic. Politically, this decision carries enormous weight. Carney's rejection sends a clear message, not just to Washington, but to every Western capital. Canada will cooperate but not comply. That distinction is powerful. It means partnership based on equality, not hierarchy. It means alliance, without subordination. For years, Canada has been seen as America's quiet twin, the polite neighbor, the loyal ally. But 2026 might mark the year that perception ends. The year Canada becomes not just a participant in Western strategy, but an independent pole within it. Let's step back and see how this fits into the bigger picture. The world of 2026 is not the world of 2016. We're no longer in a unipolar order. China, Russia, India, and the European Union have created overlapping zones of influence. The BRICS currency initiative is gaining traction, and the U.S. dollar, while still dominant, is facing subtle challenges from digital payment systems and new trade currencies. In that environment, every nation is redefining its strategy. And Carney just positioned Canada at the center of the new balance, a country that can trade with both the West and the East without being consumed by either. That's not neutrality. That's intelligence. Washington's frustration is palpable. Leaks from congressional briefings in February described Carney's decision as a diplomatic humiliation. Some politicians accused Ottawa of undermining the Western front against China. But others, quietly, admitted something more honest. Carney may have done what Washington itself failed to do: protect national interest over political ego. In truth, America's 2026 economic agenda is overstretched. Too many domestic subsidies, too many global promises, not enough credibility. Carney's no just exposed that imbalance. What we're witnessing now is the birth of something new, a Canada that leads with quiet strength. In 2026, this isn't about rebellion. It's about redefinition. Carney's decision resonates beyond trade. It reflects how smaller nations can assert sovereignty in an age of giants. And it proves that influence doesn't always come from shouting. Sometimes it comes from standing still while others stumble. This is the Canada of the 2026 era, balanced, assertive, and globally relevant. So what happens now? The U.S. will likely attempt to repackage the trade deal under new terms, perhaps under a new name, and try again later this year. Behind the scenes, American corporations will still seek access to Canadian resources, but Ottawa now holds the stronger hand. Carney has effectively changed the power dynamic. Canada can now negotiate from a position of respect, not reliance. And that, in geopolitics, is the difference between being a partner and being a pawn. There's a larger message here, one that every nation, big or small, should hear. The power to say no is the foundation of sovereignty. It's not confrontation, it's self-definition. Carney's refusal is not anti-American, it's pro-Canadian. It's about choosing independence in a world that punishes independence. And ironically, that kind of courage might be exactly what Western alliances need right now. Allies who act from principle, not pressure. For years, the Western alliance operated on automatic alignment. When Washington moved, others followed. That reflex is fading. Germany questions U.S. trade tariffs. France calls for European autonomy. Australia pursues its own defense paths. And now Canada, the most predictable ally of all, has drawn a line. This isn't fragmentation, it's evolution. Allies are maturing, moving from dependency to partnership, and Carney just gave that movement its defining moment. In 2026, when the world feels unstable, wars rumbling in Eastern Europe, inflation haunting global markets, and technology redrawing borders, one quiet act of defiance from Canada may go down as a turning point. Mark Carney's no was not a rejection of friendship. It was an affirmation of equality, a reminder that even in a world of giants, integrity still matters. Washington's plan may have collapsed, but in that collapse, something else was built, a new understanding of power. Power that doesn't come from threats or dependency, but from the calm confidence to stand your ground. And sometimes, in geopolitics as in life, one word changes everything. That word is no.